What would you consider to be Bitcoin's greatest threat that it is yet to face? And this is a great question. It sort of forces you to think critically about Bitcoin. I can go first and give you guys some time to think about it, but I think regulatory choke points which is I would consider probably before this past US election last year, was much greater. I think it's been diminished a lot. So I'm not sure that it's the greatest threat anymore, but it definitely still exists. There could be, a reactionary administration that comes in after Trump's term that sort of undoes a bunch of things that Trump has done, because his administration has been very friendly to Bitcoin and crypto. I'm not happy about the friendly to crypto part, of course, but you could see sort of a reactionary administration come in and really make it a priority, demonize, during the election, Bitcoin and crypto, and try to take it out. I could see that happening. I think that's probably the answer I would take. I don't think there's a bunch of technical risk at this point, but that certainly could happen. We've been through a lot of stress on technical debates about how Bitcoin should be built. And especially in 2017 with what was called the block size war, which was a debate about how big the block that's found about every 10 minutes by the miners should be. Right now, it has a 1 megabyte limit. There's something called SegWit that sort of expands on that, so it's a little bit higher technically. And there were big blockers which forked the Bitcoin blockchain and built something called Bitcoin Cash, which was pro bigger blocks, and they created blocks that expanded from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 32 megabytes. And so that happened. We got through that. We made a choice. The market, said, okay, this is the Bitcoin. We're going. Bcash went, I don't know, it's effectively to zero against Bitcoin, and so that choice was made. It makes me think that if there's further technical debates about how the protocol should be further developed, that we will be able to withstand them. But it was kind of a dicey situation for a little while. And the other one is, I'll actually pass it over to you guys. If you guys have any other ideas, that may be the same answer you might give, and that's fine.
Jim in the chat, he brought up quantum. That often comes up. I'm not sure if you guys saw that Graham Cook, I think his name was. He's an ex-Google engineer who recently posted about this. Did you guys check out that thread at all?
I have it saved. I started it and said I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I pinged it in the private chat there, Brady, but basically kind of does a deep dive in there with, I think, TLDR being, we're so far away from this actually being a threat to Bitcoin. And, this is already being worked on to prevent it. So that would have been my number one. Or one of the top ones. I think, yeah, like you touched on the social layer, Brady, too, and consensus. The node runner is going to get into, running one version of Bitcoin versus another. And then centralized mining, I think, is my last one that's kind of on my mind.
Yep.
Quit stealing all the other answers, Matt. Jeez.
I'm sorry, guys. I didn't go very deep with any one of them, so feel free to.
Ex-Google engineer Graham Cook explains the math behind Bitcoin encryption and why hodlers shouldn't fear quantum computing. I'll throw this into the chat. You guys can take a look at it.
John, what would your answer be?
So I would give a few when I think of like things that would really be a threat to Bitcoin. One is kind of is more theoretical, is like if we got a sound money president, and not just a president, like Congress, politicians across the country, and they were like, we're going to fix the fiat money supply. Ironically, that would harm Bitcoin. Even so, there would still be value to Bitcoin, because why should you believe the politicians that just happen to be there? Plus, there's like a censorship resistance element to Bitcoin. But dollar debasement is a huge part of the Bitcoin thesis. So just in theory, if they stop debasing the dollar, Bitcoin would not go up as much. So that's one thing. I'd put that at a near 0% chance of happening. I think you have to throw quantum on the list. I'm not going to pretend I understand it. I'm a finance major. I think there's, even within the tech world, I think there's very few people who truly understand where quantum is at today and where it's headed, what it'll be used for, and exactly how resistant Bitcoin is and what can be done to solve that. If anyone wants to do a deep dive, I would recommend Chain Code, which has some of the best Bitcoin developers out there. They did a piece, I think it was this year, a few months ago, on quantum, and it specifically was like, where's quantum today? How is Bitcoin resistant to it? What paths can we take in the future? So it's a really, really good report. And then one other one I'll throw out there, I think a custodian failure. Let's just say hypothetically, one of the big custodians out there has an issue and they literally lose like 1 million Bitcoin or something. That would not, as everyone knows, that would not affect the Bitcoin that we hold in our own mobile wallet, hardware wallet, whatever. But you have to admit that a huge part of the Bitcoin narrative right now is institutional adoption of Bitcoin, and they are using third-party custodians. So just imagine if one of those third-party custodians failed in some way, that would really, really harm the adoption narrative, because these institutions would be like, oh, I just can't trust this asset as much. Again, that wouldn't kill you. We could all use our Bitcoin the very next day, the same day, right? It wouldn't stop us. But I think you have to put that there, because it would just change how the asset is viewed globally. And then the last one would be like, if there's a solar flare and all the electronic devices on the planet go out, you have to put that on the list. But at that point, your bank account doesn't exist, your brokerage account doesn't exist. Who cares about what stocks you own? And your Bitcoin doesn't matter. And at that point, you probably just want guns and cattle. So that's kind of the list for me.
One more thing there, John, too. If anybody hasn't caught it, there was a quantum symposium put on in San Francisco by the Bitcoin Presidio, and they had a pretty good playlist they released about some really smart people in the Bitcoin space working on this. So yeah, it's a Bitcoin Presidio quantum symposium.
I want to expand on mining centralization for just a minute. And yes, we're big Bitcoin believers, but this is what I love about Bitcoiners, is Bitcoiners are willing to think critically about this thing that they have a lot of hope in for the future of humanity. But that is exactly why we have a lot of hope for it in the future of humanity, is because Bitcoiners think very critically about this system and think a lot about how it might fail. So on mining centralization, there's a couple of things. One is, the big concern is about basically a government, or a government most likely being able to censor Bitcoin transactions at the mining level, because the big mining pools, it's a collection of a bunch of miners, and the big pools will be able to basically take all that hash rate, or they are able to. This is what they do now. They take all this hash rate, and when they find a block, they are the ones who get to construct the block, meaning they choose which transactions are included on the blockchain from the mempool, which is where the transactions wait until they're included to the blockchain. And they get to decide which transactions go. And if there's, one or two or three large mining pools that the government can coerce, the fear is that they'd be able to censor Bitcoin transactions, which obviously is, against one of the great benefits of Bitcoin. So there's a couple of things happening there. One is called Stratum V2, which is a project to allow the individual miners. So let's say there's a mining operation that's capping flared gas in Texas, and they're connected to a pool, right? And they discover a block. Their actual miners discover a block. With Stratum V2, the owner of those rigs would be able to construct the block. So there's no centralized block construction happening. It's actually the individual mining operations that get to construct the block, which would go a long way to solving this problem. Another one is the ability, like Jack Dorsey and his team announced this week, this amazing evolution of Bitcoin mining hardware, the actual chips themselves. And they're open sourcing that hardware structure so that other companies can produce chips of the same structure. And they're actually better than China's Bitmain chips right now. And so that would go a long way as well. The cool thing is, Bitcoiners are thinking about these problems and actively finding ways. It's a global community that are putting a lot of brain power into how to prevent these problems from happening. So Anyway, I think that was a good review. Hopefully that is a satisfactory answer for you.
Well said on that, Brady, on the
Yep.
on the mining too. Bob Burnett, what's up, Bob? Your son-in-law is an awesome dude. He's a client of mine. Bob Burnett from Barefoot Mining has talked a lot about this too. And yeah, if we got to a point where only the non-large sort of U.S. public company miners, right? If that's the vast majority of those collecting those transactions, and there's maybe a small 5% of just local small-time miners doing this, who's going to put forth the transactions of those, in a future dystopian world where the government says, hey, Isaiah is actually a terrorist now, because he didn't go through X, Y, or Z to do something. So who's going to put forth his transactions? So it's super important to keep this open, just as the web needs to be open.
Yeah, great question, great conversation there.